Good morning, everyone. So in 2017, on his show The Shop, LeBron said it's hard for him to say a football player is the GOAT of all athletes.
LeBron James and Tom Brady, who were recently together on The Shop, which is LeBron's show on HBO. Now, one of the things that came up took us back to 2017, when LeBron James was talking about players being the greatest of all time, and he said, my only argument with a football player being the greatest of all time is they only play one side of the floor. Yes, Brady is unbelievable. He's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, but he affects the game one way. I'm not saying he's not great. He's the greatest football player of all time.
Now, this argument to me is crazy. I don't understand why someone as intelligent and media savvy as LeBron would say that. LeBron is a great athlete and extremely knowledgeable in sports. But to say that football players can't be considered the GOAT of all athletes because they don't play both sides of the field, it's overly dismissive and just making very basic assumptions.
Well, Tom Brady never forgets anything. So this came up when he was on The Shop last week, and he said, it just depends what style you like. You could say, well, you're maybe the most accomplished. I would say, okay, yeah, I've won a lot of games, Super Bowls and so forth. You can't do everyone else's job. I can't block, tackle, run, catch. I sure as hell can't run, but I can throw the bleep out of the ball. So just let me do that, and let me do it really well.
Firstly, with Tom leading the offense and not making mistakes and turning over the ball, gives his defense time to rest, so they can be fresher when they go out and face the opposing side. They can have a better chance physically of going much harder than if they were tired from constantly being on the field. This also reduces their risk of getting injured. The defense knows they can trust and rely on Brady to drive the ball down the field and score, so it takes a ton of pressure off the defense. It allows them to do what they do without the added pressure that it's on them to win the game. That doesn't sound like much on the face of it, but ask any professional athlete how much easier it is to compete with less pressure on you. You're not as tense, your mind isn't occupied with stress where every play could lose the game, or you're feeling like you need to make a play. You gotta make this high risk attempt of an interception, because if you don't, you could lose the game because you don't think your offense is going to score. So it's a lot easier for you to focus just solely on your job because you know that you got 12. You got 12 coming out if you do your job, and you know he's going to deliver.
2 Super Bowls, we've been down multiple scores in the fourth quarter, and he does it. He does it. It's not too big for him. At each moment, he settles the whole offense and the whole team down and say we're going to be good, and he does it. He delivers each and every time, and that's what makes him the best player ever.
Can you kind of take us on to the sidelines? What was it like just being there and watching the final minutes of this game and seeing the Packers potentially driving to tie this game up even if they got the 2-pointer?
There was still some time on the clock when they were driving down the field, but I always remember we had Tom at quarterback. So
that's all we had to keep doing, man. We said, let's get stops. And then when it got to overtime, man, I basically untied my cleats and watched Brady like you guys did.
The other thing that I think gets highly glossed over, and it's mainly because we don't actually witness it happening live, is the impact that Brady has in the locker room. The things that he does behind closed doors to help every player, to improve them, to develop better skills, to develop stronger mentality, to develop a stronger belief, how to study film. All of this stuff we don't see. However, what we do see is the results. We see the wins. We hear his teammates, both offensive and defensive players, saying how he helps them. So to say that Tom Brady only affects the game on one way is just untrue.
That's a guy that is dedicated to football all year round, every day. So when he goes to a team, he doesn't have to do a lot of yelling and screaming. That's not him. He's not super vocal unless he has to be. But just how he prepares, how he comes in each day, his greatness, people just watch. And when he walks into a locker room, I'm sure everybody in Tampa was like, oh, let me just see how Tom does this. Let me see how he does that. And they're looking at him from 2 lockers down, 3 lockers down. And the next thing you know, everyone else around him gets better. So that's just his presence and what he brings to a team by just being himself.
And truthfully, I'm interested to continue to learn from a guy like that, understand his particular pedigree. I think even though I'm in my 11th year, I've always had a mindset of wanting to learn from others. I think he's one great guy, as well as Gronk and some other guys around our particular locker room. So good interaction.
Some of the things that make him great is doing the same things every day and being consistent at it. And you don't get to be a great player unless you work at it every day, not when the cameras are rolling, but when the cameras are off. And, you know, he takes care of his body. He understands the game. He will play the same way, whether it's the Super Bowl or whether it's preseason. He comes to win, and I think that's a great mental aspect added to our team.
If Tom Brady is lighting up the other team or mounting a massive comeback like he normally does, how much momentum and energy do you think this brings to his whole team? How do you think his whole team is going to feel? They'd lift their game because of it. Everyone knows how much of an impact momentum is. It lifts everybody. You give your teammates, both the defense and the offense, that hope, that massive injection of belief. It changes everything. How many times in sport have we seen this? Just look at Super Bowl 51 and you tell me that defense didn't feel Brady's impact. Ask every defensive player on the Patriots how much Brady impacted them in the second half of the Super Bowl 51. They'll tell you it was huge. And I'm not saying Brady is the sole person that deserves all the credit for the wins. Teams win championships, absolutely. However, to say a football player can't impact both sides of the game is absurd, especially someone of Tom Brady's caliber.
Okay, we are live with Duran Harmon. Hey, 28-3, down.
Yeah.
Did you ever down?
Never. I'm trying to tell you.
Come on, down.
Even when it said, and even when it looked like, all we kept saying on the sideline, we got to play mistake-free football on defense. We can't give them anything, and we just got to get the ball back to Tom Brady. When you got the greatest player ever on your team, you know anything is possible, and we knew it. We just had to get the ball back to him. And once we stopped shooting ourselves in the foot on defense and started making tackles and started making plays and playing a little bit more aggressive how we usually play, that's when we started to get rolling, and we was able to get the ball back to Tom.
I generally avoid getting in too deep in debating who is the GOAT of all sports. I just think there's way too many differences between different eras, teams versus individual sports, the competition that's available within those sports, the risks involved between the different sports, all these things. But someone as astute and knowledgeable about sports as LeBron should definitely know how hard it is to go to just one Super Bowl, let alone 10 and win 7 of them with 2 different teams. You can't argue this. These are absolute numbers. 10 Super Bowl appearances, 7 wins, 2 different teams. There can't be any more debate that the common factor in all of this is Tom Brady. If he doesn't affect both sides of the game, how on earth does he get his teams into the Super Bowl that often? That's like me saying LeBron wasn't the common factor in the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Miami Heat, and the Lakers winning their championships. I would never say that. It's not true and it's disrespectful.
Tom Brady is the best at his sport of all times. There is no conversation. So relative to all the other quarterbacks or all the other football players in the history of football, you cannot put anybody on Tom Brady's level. Can you say the same thing about LeBron James? I think LeBron James is great, but I'm pretty sure that, what are we, like 50-50? Some people would say probably 80-20. Most people would say that Jordan is the greatest of all time. So LeBron James isn't even the consensus greatest of all time in his sport. So he need to stop barking up this Tom Brady tree.
Yet it was LeBron James who once said no football player can be a GOAT because they don't play both sides of the ball, right?
It's hard for me to say that, and I to a certain extent, Skip, I agree. It's just hard for me to look at it because someone else can do things.
Okay, so I'll use LeBron's logic against you because if that's true, then you can't blame Tom Brady for what happened in the first Eli Super Bowl because Tom did what he always does. With 2 minutes left, he drove him 70 yards for a touchdown. They went up. He hit Randy Moss with a touchdown pass to go up 14-10.
Yeah.
And then Bill Belichick allowed Eli Manning to go 75 yards against his defense for the game-winning touchdown.
Right.
Well, that's not Brady's fault.
Hold on.
You can't hold that against Brady.
Was time still on the clock? So Tom Brady got an opportunity to get the ball
Like
back, right?
30 seconds.
Oh, that's all you need. You don't need but 30 seconds.
Okay.
I've seen Joe Montana. I've seen Tom go down there and get in field goal range in 30 seconds.
Then how about the Philly Super Bowl in which Tom Brady threw for an all-time playoff record, not just a Super Bowl record, an all-time playoff record,
Right.
505 yards and put up 33 points on a top 5 Philadelphia Eagles defense. And Bill Belichick upchucked all over the field because he allowed Nick Foles, the backup quarterback, to be Super Bowl MVP by hanging 41 on his defense that did not feature the guy who had taken the most defensive snaps during the regular season, Malcolm Butler, who mysteriously, inexplicably was in the doghouse that day.
Let that go, Skip.
I don't have to let it go because it's hard to believe that it wasn't a little sabotagey for Brady.
Man, see, there you go with that word, sabotaging.
Well, I don't know. It just, I to this day, I've still heard no explanation why Malcolm Butler didn't play.
I don't think you're going to be receiving one.
Okay.
Skip, all I'm saying is this. If you want to say Tom Brady is the GOAT, I got no problem with that.